Okay, working, labeling live. Hang
Yeah,
on.
we are live.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Sunshine Cathedral Christians and Cocktails conversation. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We are glad that you are joining us, and we have a great discussion lineup again for this wonderful evening. But before we do just that, I do want to give a couple of other reminders to get them out of the way. You probably hear them again at the end. Of course, on Mondays, we do Christians and Cocktails at 6 p.m. Everybody got a cocktail or a beverage of choice in hand of some sort, and we hope that you at home or wherever you are have your beverage of choice in hand as well. Also, on this coming Wednesday at 6 p.m., there is Share in the Chair, and this Wednesday it's going to be Reverend Terry Steese Pierce, who is the Senior Minister of Joy MCC in Orlando, is going to be with us. And then, of course, we got Sunday service at 10:30. And I think we're going to have a couple of new things to roll out that you're going to hear about real soon. But for tonight, we are glad you have joined us for Christians and Cocktails. And I'm going to toss it off to our Senior Minister, Darrell Watkins, Reverend Dr. Darrell Watkins, to get it going here. So, Darrell, it is all yours now.
All right. Thanks for joining us for Christians and Cocktails, our Monday night panel discussion. We have some questions in the queue already, some really good ones. And then, of course, you can try to stump us with brand new ones that you can just type in, and Tito will see those and try to inject them at some point. We have a new person on our panel tonight. It's the old cast of characters. Last week, we were joined by Reverends Margarita and Linda. They're not with us this week. They'll be back some other time. But they had to step off this week. But stepping in this week is Chris Medeiros, who brings a very unique perspective, because not only is he a public theologian, he's also a clinician. He's a therapist in Boston. So not only can he talk theology, but if we get a little crazy with it, he can reel us in. So that's so.
Does it mean we have to behave?
Yeah.
Well, if you have too many cocktails.
But so anyway, so Chris Medeiros from Boston, welcome. We knew him from way back in our Episcopal Divinity School days. He was a lecturer and administrator. And and he's still in the area and still doing good stuff. So, and tonight he's with us. So yay, good for us. All right. So, and of course, you know everyone else. I'm the Senior Minister, Darrell Watkins. I'll go to the left on my screen. I don't know what your tic-tac-toe situation is, but to the left of me is the Reverend Dr. Robert Griffin, our Executive Minister, also my husband. He's the Executive Minister of my wife. And then below him, there is Dennis and Tito, Dennis McWilliams-Ramos and Tito McWilliams-Ramos. They are volunteers, key volunteers at the Sunshine Cathedral. Dennis, the current chair of the board of directors. Then to their right, there is Tara Sperry, resident diva, and then next to her, for real though, and then next to her, a resident technician. She's is Sam Miller, who is
diva of a different kind.
Yes, a diva. Technical diva. She's a technical director and a college professor, and she does our sound, and she's moving into some production work. So yay. And then of course I introduced Chris there at the bottom. So that's who we all are, and seasoned panel. And so let's begin with the questions in the queue, and then we'll move to some live questions if they come in. I'll start below me. So let's start with Sam. Sam, do you have a question for us?
I do. Let me look here. Okay, so the creation story has always been one that kind of I couldn't really wrap my head around. And so this question, it isn't mine, but it really resonated with me. It says, why didn't God just forgive Adam and Eve instead of punishing the whole human race for their disobedience?
Right. Well, the short answer is because that's the way somebody wrote the story. When I write the story, that's not how it goes. When I write the story, it's going to look very different. But whoever wrote that story, and you know what? It's not as old as you think. It's about primordial history. That story was written about the time of King David. So it really is just someone's story. And also there are two creation myths. And they're side by side. The priestly editors did that on purpose so that we could pick the one we liked the best, that we could compare them, we could draw various conclusions from them. And so in one of the creation myths, there's no tree, there's no snake, there's none of that. In fact, in one of them, God looks at God's creation and calls it very good. Full stop. It's all good. It's the other one, which is an older one. And from one is more urban, the other more agrarian. But the more agrarian one, that's where there's this crafty snake and this couple, and the couple is 6 minutes old, and God sets them up. This is okay. You can have everything but this one tree that I put in the middle, unguarded, and pointing out to you with your 6 minute old consciousness and maturity level. And so God 100% sets them up, and then threatens them with a lie. If you eat that, you'll die. And the snake later, corrects that information, says, you know what, if you eat it, you won't die. And they eat it and they didn't die. So, the snake, for whatever else, is really the only one telling the truth in the story. So it's a myth. I mean, and it's a fable at that. Snakes talking when animals talk, that's a fable. So this story is about a lot of things. It's about the human maturation process. We're born in innocence and our needs are met. And then as we get older, we get curious and we learn not to stick our finger in the electric socket, or there's consequences. We start questioning authority. We want some independence. We recognize that our self is different than our parents. And then some of the things we learn, we learn the hard way, and we have consequences. And as we grow up, we go to college, we join the military, we get jobs, we have families, we have to toil. And so this myth is just showing us how life unfolds. It shows us what life is like. We start out in this perfect little innocent garden, and then we grow and we ask questions and we do things. And when you do things, some things you do well and some things you mess up, and that's just life. So the myth is that's what it is. Now, Christians got a hold of it, and if there's ever been a group that can mess up something, it's Christians. Christians got a hold of this Jewish story and started interpreting it in ways that was never intended. And so that's where a lot of our weird theology comes from. It's from Christians appropriating and maybe even misusing the text. And so women have been blamed, like women brought sin into the world, and we're all born bad, and really just a lot of bad theology that really messes up our psyches from that. So yes, I mean, even in the question, why did God have to punish everyone for their disobedience? Well, first of all, what kind of setup is that you have to blindly obey a thing? You're 2 minutes old, you don't know anything, but if you don't obey me, everyone is screwed. The whole setup is not something I want to participate in. It's not, that's, God has to be better than that, or I'm not interested. And so, yes, God doesn't need to punish the world, and God doesn't need to punish an individual to stop punishing the world. Hashtag atonement theology. And so, yeah, all of that is stuff that we have imposed on the story. The story itself is just a story, and it parallels the way life works. We're born innocent, everything's great and wonderful, and then things get harder. And we ask questions, and there's a price for our learning, and that's the way life is. That's the way life works. And here's this beautiful sort of children's story that prepares us for the way life is. But we've used it in some less life-giving ways. Maybe. I don't know if that has answered the questioner's question, but did it do anything for you, Sam?
Yeah, I've never heard it explained in the way that it's kind of a fable and like what those symbols might be. And so I like that. I like that explanation a lot.
All right, we have other theologians on the panel that may have a whole different take on it if you want to jump in. Robert or Chris?
Well, I think those Christians that got a hold of the story and changed it must have had cocktails.
Well, Augustine was one of them, and Augustine had everything and almost everybody. Augustine didn't become prudish until he had lived his life already. So Augustine gives me gas anyway. But yeah, a lot of our stuff, a lot of our weird stuff comes Augustine onward. And that's 5th century. I mean, that's already old. I mean, or late in the tradition, but
yeah.
Huh. All right. So Tara, next to Sam. What's the question?
Yes, I have a question. Let me just get it here. Okay. Again, not my question, but one that I can relate to. Growing up, I was told it wasn't Christian-like to drink, dance, or do anything else fun. Why do folks say this, and why do you think differently?
Okay, I'm not going to answer that one. Give me another one. And you'll see why later. You'll see why later. You'll see why later.
Okay. Let's see.
I will answer that one, but not now.
Okay. Does prayer help in a crisis?
I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Somebody's had too much to drink already.
No, of course it does. Just like talking with your friend or talking with a therapist or talking in a support group helps in a crisis. I had a therapist one time, and I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, and I wound up taking a lot of medication to get that. Part of it was organic, but also part of it's habit. You learn some dysfunctional ways of responding, and sometimes one of the ways you learn is panic, or whatever. And she was a Gestalt therapist, so she didn't waste a lot of time. She was about, she did everything but provide slap therapy, But anyway, that was her deal. And she said, that's just energy, and you've got to get that out. And she would say, talk it out, walk it out, which meant come to the $150 an hour session and then go to the gym. Talk it out, walk it out, release that energy. And prayer is one of the ways that we can release that energy. Now, we may also believe angels attend us, or there's an external God who hears and responds, or maybe an internal divine presence that is activated. We can have all kinds of theologies about prayer, but no matter what we believe, even if we're just trying it on, to pray through something or to pray about something, the psalmist prays through things, whining, complaining, giving thanks and praise, just whatever he's feeling, he sort of, or she or they move through it. They just express it. And so it is this releasing of energy and calming of nerves and helping us to refocus. So I do think prayer is good in a crisis because it's one of the ways that we walk it out and talk it out. The therapeutic value of prayer, there's probably an expert on the panel who could actually speak to it better than I can.
Well, I was going to say that in my practice, I primarily deal with queer people, and from a variety of faith traditions, or a good number from no faith tradition, because I say with a lot of humility that there can be so much damage that queer people get from the religions they were raised in. For some people, they can't come back. So I try to find a way to talk about, I use the word prayer when that is relevant to the person. Otherwise, I talk about intention and reflection. And I think all of those things, when you begin to put your attention on something, you focus on something, or even if you use prayer as a kind of communication, you're inclining your mind to work on something. So I think prayer works in that way. Or for people who are familiar with the Buddhist tradition of metta, it's all about compassion and wishing intention. So I think if, for Christians, this idea of prayer is their way of doing it, but there are multiple ways to do it. And I know even taking it out of that realm, that when I talk to people, it really is important to come back and say, what is it that you want? What is it you're reflecting on? What is it? And I think that's invaluable. So before people kind of, but prayer should be to God and to the, sure. But I think that the intention is what changes your life.
Yeah. Right. Centering prayer is a big part of my practice, and centering prayer isn't to anything. Centering prayer is just sitting. Centering prayer is just being in the presence as you understand it, and just being there. And it's an intimate sort of communion. And that's relaxing to me. That helps relieve my anxieties. And so, yeah, I can ask God to do a thing, but that's only one way to pray. And so I can also just sit with the God of my understanding, or I can just say, this is, I don't even know if you're listening. I don't even know if you're out there. I don't even know if I believe in you. And yet I still have this need to reach out, to do something. Well, that's prayer. And it's a release of energy. And so, yeah, I think it helps. Now, is it the genie in the bottle? Well, that's a whole nother discussion, and probably an ugly argument, depending on who's all on the panel. But whether or not it's a genie in a bottle, it can be helpful. It can be one of the tools in our toolkit. And in fact, people say that, I don't pray, and yet I know they do wish, or they do focus, or they do think intently. And sometimes people pray, and maybe these are some of the most powerful prayers. They pray with their actions. they pray by writing the check. They pray by volunteering the hours. They pray by giving the hug, by saying the kind words. There's lots of ways to pray, and so my belief is we're Christians, we're religious. It's belief, which is beliefs are just really well rehearsed opinions. But my belief is that yes, the prayer can be helpful in a crisis. So there's that. Chris, do you have a question to throw out?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, and I guess this motivates me because of my work. But why does God have so many sexual hangups? And this is not my question, by the way, but it's one that interests me.
I think that God is presented as having sexual hangups because the people who write about God have sexual hangups. Bishop Spong used to say, if horses had gods, they'd look like horses. And there's a line from a wonderful play called Inherit the Wind about the Scopes monkey trial. And there's a line in the play that says, God created man in his own image, and man being a gentleman returned the favor. And that's what we forget. We like to pretend, or some of us. I grew up in the Bible Belt, surrounded by fundamentalists. There were even fundamentalist branches in my family. There were Catholics, which have their own brand of fundamentalism. It's true. Catholics always deny it. Hello, it's my family. It's true. So Catholics and Methodist, and whether Methodist or fundamentalist or progressive depends on, the Methodist, actually. They're all over the, and then we had Southern Baptists. So we had these Baptists and these Methodists and these Catholics. And then later on, some Mormons married in. And so, and then because it was super trendy in the 80s, all of them were going Pentecostal. So it was, but none of these are terribly progressive traditions. And so I grew up thinking that religion was innately sex negative, and really just negative about the human body and about, anything that had to do with fun. I used to say that a fundamentalist is really, from the early 20th century, there were these fundamentals that they thought you had to have. And so fundamentalists believed that there were that only Christians were right with God, and you had to observe these fundamentals to be Christian. And there were very narrow understandings of some doctrines. And so that's what a fundamentalist was. So that's the official definition, but a less official, but I think as accurate one, is a fundamentalist is someone who is desperately afraid that somebody somewhere is having a good time. And I try to, in their experience, be that person, that I'm having a, and so, I mean, never mind, that the prophet Nehemiah said that the joy of the Lord is our strength, not the, not the hang-ups about God is our strength, but the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so, anyway, our sacred literature, and readers make meaning. So what our literature even says depends on who we are and what we think it says, because we're bringing ourselves to the conversation. But beyond that, sacred literature is literature written by people, and people are culturally formed, and they have their own issues and their own hangups. So, so not only are people writing not in a vacuum, but people are reading not in a vacuum. So we attribute a lot of stuff to God that is really much more about us than God. If we read the Hebrew Bible, that is a lusty, earthy, physical culture. I mean, people with multiple wives and feeling as if they are being faithful to even have sexual relationships with their servants. Now, we can talk about, agency and servitude and slavery and bondage. I mean, we have ethical issues with all of that. And yet these heroes in our sacred tradition, they would have multiple partners. And the entire Song of Songs is a song about sex. It's probably a medley of songs about, people on their honeymoon, really having a good time. But it's not really about a wedding. These are lovers who are sneaking away into the gardens, and there's a whole chapter where the woman in the story is masturbating and fantasizing, and her fingers are dripping choice myrrh. And then because she goes out then to the street, she's in her nightgown and her fingers are still dripping choice myrrh. people mistake her for a prostitute, and the police pounce on her and try to haul her in. I mean, I love 8 chapters. Read it, the Song of Songs. It's amazing. And then these sexual positions that are described, the missionary position, oral sex, his fruit was sweet in my mouth. I mean, it's read the Song of Songs, the word of the Lord, the Song of Songs. And so you can see.
I think that needs to be a discussion all by itself.
Right? But you can see that the sexual hangups may be being read into the text more than they're coming out of the text. So why does God have so many sexual hangups? I just don't think she does.
Thanks for sending some of that Florida heat up to Boston.
Woo!
Sam has disappeared. Oh my God.
Like, that's too
She
much.
needed a cigarette.
She had to go get her nerve healed.
And my dog also started throwing a complete fit.
I will never look at Myrrh again the same.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love, when she's calling to him, she says, "Blow on my garden." I mean, it's a really amazing thing. And she's lying in his shadow, and she compares him to a palm tree, and she says, "I will climb the tree." I mean, it's good business. What you got, Dennis? I bet you got something.
Well, you might have heard this question before. So thank you, Tara, for starting off with my question. That was my question. So this one is very personal to me. And well, you heard it, but I'll say it again. So growing up, I was told it wasn't very Christian-like to drink or dance or do anything fun for that matter. And so why is it that folks think this, and why do we think differently? Or why do you think differently?
Well, you know what? I think there's 2 things we can do when we're miserable. We can either find ways to break out of that. We can go to therapy and support groups, and take friends and take classes, and do things that are enjoyable, go to the gym, go to parties, watch television, go to movies, eat food that we love. We can either find ways of breaking out of that, or we can venerate it. We can make misery sort of its own God. We can idolize it. And so I think some of us who experience misery wanted to be healed. And some of us who experience misery wanted to validate the misery. And so we made it dogma and doctrine. I think the people on this panel were on the healing side of things. We wanted to be happy. We thought we deserved to be happy. We thought there was probably some way to be happy. Other people didn't see it that way. And so they validate their misery by making it sacred. And I think I can say that without too much judgment. I just made a different choice and wouldn't go back.
Well, can I follow up with one other quick question?
Sure. We've got Baptists, Catholics, and Mormons on the panel, though. Somebody's got something to say about this. But anyway, go ahead with your follow-up question.
And do you think Jesus would have a drink with us?
I think he would serve the drink. His first miracle in the Gospel of John was tending bar. Hello, yes. He would have a drink with us. He would pour the drink.
Well, then I think we should
he would
drink
take water and make it the drink. Yes. Cheers, Jesus.
Cheers.
Cheers, Jesus.
One thing I've noticed is that, like you're saying, like the miracles, like Jesus doesn't cure women of their desire or like their choice to be prostitutes or like to do like these kind of things. He heals them of their illnesses or their sorrows,
Right. Well, Jesus was you know what? There's probably somebody in the world that their ambition is to be a sex worker. God bless them. But most people, that is not their first choice. That is circumstances lead them to that. And Jesus was very concerned about economic justice. So he's not going to abuse the person who's already a victim of economic injustice and then say, now what you've done to survive, let me beat you up about that too. That just doesn't seem very Jesus-y to me. And somebody, if they've made their choice, this is my body, this is what I want to do with it, I think I'm bringing pleasure and joy to the world. Well, okay, we can have that discussion too. But a lot of people, they do sex work for the same reason that people do other jobs that aren't very glamorous or maybe be risky in lots of ways. It's because it's what's available to them and you have to survive. And so, yeah, I don't think Jesus is coming down with condemnation on people who are trying to survive. I think Jesus is more upset with systems that leave people so few options.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we probably got another question from Tito, but I want to do a little break here. Tito, anything coming online we need to address? Any questions pop up? Or
No questions yet. I thought one was about to pop up, but maybe they're still figuring out
thinking about
how
it.
they want to ask it.
Where is Kevin Conkle, who won last week with that wonderful question about where was the body? Like, where'd it go?
Might be on, but I might have missed him.
Yeah, Kevin's here. He was with us.
Okay.
He'll probably check in. Okay, let's go. We got about 5 or 6 more minutes to go here. So, Darrell, who's next?
That would be Tito.
So you recently said that spirit is energy. I know that energy doesn't die. So where does the spirit dwell?
Right. Well, I think we're still thinking maybe of who said this? Was it Ikeda? He was the leader of the Nichiren Buddhism movement for a long time, Ikeda. Someone, I'll say it was him, said, when asked, how do you get peace of mind? And he said, think of everything that's important to you and put my in front of it. My family, my job, my career, my money, my house, my pets, my plans, my. And he said, the more things you can put my in front of, the further away you are from inner peace. And then as that list gets smaller, the closer you are to inner peace. And so I think we still think of the spirit as being my spirit. And so we wonder where my thing lives, where my thing goes on the shelf or in the cupboard, or in the drawer or in the safe, or and I think the Buddhists can help us with their concept of no self. That the idea that there is an individual permanent me is an illusion. I am already not the person I was a year ago, certainly not 10 years ago, certainly not 30 years ago. I've learned more, I've been exposed to more, I've been more places, I've met more people, and every encounter and every experience changes me. I'm different than I was. I think he's the same person, Akita, who said, if you take a car apart, here's the windshield wiper, and here's the carburetor, and here's the battery, and here's the tire, and here's the wheel, and here's the leather seat, and here's the trunk. You take it apart, which part is the car? The car is all of it, all of the parts, and all of the workers who contribute, who put it together, and the assembly line, and the salesperson who sold it to you. And like, it's a lot of experiences and a lot of parts and a lot of ideas and a lot of work. And it all goes into making this thing that we call a car. But that thing is not just that thing. That thing is so many things. And the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And that's what we are. We have all these parts and all these experiences and all these relationships that contribute to who we think we are, but that is all in flux. So it's always changing. So where does the spirit live? Well, I think the spirit is the energy of all of that. And so the spirit is ubiquitous. The spirit is omnipresent. The spirit individuates or expresses as each of us. And so we think we're a thing. we think we're an individual, but we're really part of a whole. And so I think that's where our idea that there's not a spot where God is not, I think that's the answer. The spirit is everywhere, and our experience of the spirit is individualized, but the spirit itself is ubiquitous, eternal energy. And we have our experience of it, but you can't lock down the whole thing.
So we've got 2 last-minute questions. I know we've actually 3 questions, and I know we've kind of run out of time.
Really? At 6:30 they come rolling in?
Okay, for the next show.
We'll do what we can. We'll do it. First of all, whoever asked that question, well, no, that was in the queue, wasn't it?
Yes.
But does anyone have anything to add to that? It's a big question. I couldn't have done total justice to it, so add something to it. I think the spirit dwells everywhere, and what we think of as our spirit is just our experience of the spirit. Okay, give me one or two of those last minute questions.
So the first one that came through is there a still small voice or just our own wishful thinking?
Yes. Next. Well, I mean, right? I mean, there is the Jungian sort of collective unconscious, of course, and there is our own. Then there's our own sort of ego, our own sort of sense of I, and so there's that. And there's probably something mysterious. I mean, so it could be all of those things, any of those things, and discernment is where we have to figure out which is which. So yeah, sometimes it's the universe, and sometimes it's all of us together breaking through just to me, and sometimes it's my own little whatever's going on in my head. I mean, it's any of that could be true, and we just have to figure it out.
There's
And
a
I would
pill for
say-
that, Darrell.
Say what? Oh, trust me, if I'm not taking it, I have or I will. I am not afraid of pills. God knows. So, no, I mean, but really, the internal guidance, we have to figure out what it is. But I know that here's my story, right? Everyone has a story, but my story is, and in later years, I've tried to analyze it and make it sound less crazy. But when I'm 19 and it happened, I just took it for what it was. I went to a Pentecostal church. Remember the Pentecostal fad? I talked about my family. I went to a Pentecostal church for healing, to be healed of this this homosexuality thing I had going on. By the way, it stuck with me. It's still here. So I went to be healed of this this gay thing. And these prayer warriors descend upon me like the Green Berets, and little old lady hands are all over me, and a preacher shouting into a microphone and into my ear, and the organ's playing, and it's all very hypnotic, actually. And I what they called slain in the spirit. Later, I heard people referring to it as resting in the spirit because slain sounds violent. But anyway, it's where you're sort of overcome, and you have this sort of this sort of altered state of consciousness experience. And so I'm laid out, the little old lady's praying for me, and I hear a message, and I heard it, but it wasn't audible. I mean, no one else heard it. It wasn't in my ear, and yet I heard it. I felt it. I knew it. And that voice that I heard said, "Not even God can heal what is not sick." Changed my life, has become a cornerstone of my ministry. Not even God can heal what is not sick. Was that my subconscious that just knew more than my conscious did? Because this was 1986, 87, and I didn't know anything about the American Psychiatric Association, but they had said that homosexuality is not disordered back in 1973. So the knowledge is out there. So did my subconscious know a thing that my conscious didn't know and tried to fill me in? Or was it an angel? Was it the ancestors? Was it God? What was it? Well, I may spend the rest of my life trying to figure out what it was. But what happened was I heard a liberating, healing message that changed my life. And so I've got to figure out, was that my subconscious? Was that the collective unconscious? Was that God? Was that the angels? Was that the ancestors? Or did I just have a psychotic break and make that mess up? Whatever, I've been happier and freer since, and sharing that story has helped a lot of people over the years. And so when you hear that still small voice, it's up to you to figure out where it came from. But if it gives good advice, don't discount it.
Yeah.
Now I've talked about mind stuff. I mean, Chris may want to add something to that. I mean, I've totally misrepresented the psychological profession just then, but
No,
that was my experience.
You did not. And I think that Jungian understanding, I mean, I would say the same thing. And this is what I tell clients, like, listen. And what I would say to that, my tiny critique is that I don't know that you do need to figure it out, because it can be all of those things. It can be some of those things. And I would also say, be open to your story about what it is changing as your experience changes. Like, I think of it this way this year, and I think of it that way next year. And that doesn't mean it's less true. I think it says something about the nature of truth, which is that truth isn't this static thing. It's this thing that moves through our life like a wave.
Okay, we can take 2 more minutes. I don't know if we can do two questions in 2 minutes, but we can take 2 minutes. Give me another one, Tito.
So we had a sunshine newbie in the live feed today, and he asked a question. He says, "Shall I feel different because I go to my Catholic church and pray and participate, knowing that I am gay?"
Wow, I'm very hesitant to tell people how they have to feel. Because feeling, I mean, I'm not in such control of my feelings. My feelings just tend to happen, and then I have to deal with them. So I don't know how you ought to feel. Robert and I, we were in New York. We rushed back to Arkansas to be with my grandmother the day she died, and I got to be by her side in her last moments. And she died, and I needed something. In Texarkana, Arkansas, a lot of what I would have gotten my needs met in New York or in Cambridge, not available in Texarkana, Arkansas. And so I needed something. And it was a Saturday night. And so we went to Saturday night mass at Sacred Heart Church. And I'm sure the sermon was boring. And I'm sure the people were nice enough. I don't really remember much about it, other than the service was a little dull to me. And yet, I prayed the prayers and I sang the folk songs. It was a Saturday night guitar mass. It was something. It was a sacred site. It was the people of God. It was prayer and worship. It was something. And I'm glad it was there for me, because there was not a lot available to me in that moment, and I needed something. And I love sacred sites. It's hard for me to pass a cathedral or a chapel. Every hospital I go to the chapel. I love shrines. When we were in Jerusalem, not only did I go to all the Christian and Jewish things, I also went to the Muslim and Baha'i things. The Hanging Gardens, the Baha'i Hanging Gardens were one of the highlights of my experience. So sacred spots that are dedicated for prayer and gathering, I have a hard time saying too much bad about them. I think we got a great thing going on at the Sunshine Cathedral, but different people have different needs for different reasons. And if at a Catholic mass is where you feel close to God, as long as they're not beating you up. If they are being mean to you, I would say there are other Catholic churches that will not be mean to you. Find a parish that is nicer. I would say that. But otherwise, if you're getting needs met, you're not being hurt, you're not hurting anyone else, and you're getting needs met, who am I to tell you that that's not the right thing to do?
Okay, well, we're going to pull a full stop there.
I will ask Tito to email me the question we didn't get to. We'll add it to the queue for next week.
Yes,
Perfect.
we got it already.
And so as we did the last time, we're going to give our panelists a final word based on maybe something you heard tonight, or maybe you want to throw a question out there just for people to think about and hang on to. And so we're going to just whatever comes to your mind that you want to say, hey, this was what I thought about as this was going on, or whatever your thought may be that you want to leave with the audience tonight. And I think I'll start with Dennis.
You were coming to me first. Last week I talked about being thankful that I'm part of this church, but I want to say that we were talking about prayer earlier. And to me, I've learned over the years that prayer is not just, asking and asking and asking a thing and asking this entity to give me what I want or whatever. And I love when you said that prayer is action. And that resonates with me more now. You know, what we can do for the people that are around us or that have a bigger need than we do also fulfills our own needs, I think. So I thought that was awesome that you said that, because I was going to interject afterwards after you were done talking, but then you jumped in and you said it, and I thought that was pretty awesome. So I like that.
Sam.
This kind of more focused on my question, but I like that we can we're open to evaluate the Bible as a piece of literature, or as a piece of theater, as a piece of, not something to be taken so literally. And I think that like really hearing you kind of explain it in those terms helps me to be able to celebrate it more.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear my name. Going back to the question that the Sunshine Newbie asked about Catholic Church, like you said, unless they're beating you up, I mean, there's no reason not to go there. I remember being a kid growing up Catholic, knowing that I was gay at the age of maybe 13, 14. I kept going to Catholic Church because that's where my family went, and that's where I felt comfortable, and that's where I felt the connection to God at that time in my life. But as I got a little older, towards the age of like 16, I started hearing the message a little differently and hearing how they were saying all these negative things about my life or what my life would be in the future, and, you know, being gay, being, you know, against God and whatnot. And at that point is when, at 16, I decided myself that it wasn't a place for me to go to anymore. I didn't feel safe there anymore. I didn't lose a connection to God. I still had my connection to God. It was my own personal connection to God. And I never went back to church until I met Dennis and introduced me to Sunshine Cathedral. And I saw the difference from day one. But yeah, if he's happy where he's at, and like you said, if he's not hurting anyone, no one's hurting him, why not?
Tara.
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to Dennis again for stealing his question.
You
Sorry.
you didn't know. There are no names associated with questions,
Yeah.
so it's okay.
And I'm just looking forward to reading the Bible passages that Darrell was speaking of earlier with the sexual. I know what I want to be reading
Change your
today.
Wow. Okay. So, Chris, we thank you for being with us tonight, and we're going to let you go next.
So I just want to be so grateful to be on this panel and to be able to be part of this community, thanks to this wonderful technology that I don't have to just go once a year and be part of this community. And I've learned a lot of how to do that in the past time. And, you know, it does make me reflect on how important spiritual and psychological health are, and that they can go together. And that I think a lot of queer people have been damaged by both of these institutions. And I love this idea that maybe we can turn them in a way that they can both be healing. And I did want to tell a very brief story that kind of relates to Darrell's story. I was part of an interfaith organization through the General Conference, which used to be the Conference of Christians and Jews. And I remember we visited a Jewish seminary, and there was, we were at a conservative seminary, and this gay Jewish man got up and started to pray and daven, you know, the kind of, and I remember sitting there and thinking, unmistakably, God was present in this tradition that had nothing to do with anything I knew anything about. And that's what started me on a big journey. Like, wait a minute, I can have my tradition, but wow, God is so much bigger than me. And that really started me on a great journey. So I wanted to maybe put that in with this idea of the question about the Catholic Church, that in Darrell's critique too, find a place that's healthy and feels nurturing. But boy, there's lots of really good places out there.
For sure.
That's Chris. All right, Darrell, bring it home.
If you look at my Facebook page just today on my personal, we're turning our backyard into a prayer garden. And we haven't even started with the tradition of our lives yet. We're lifelong Christians. Right now, we've got Buddhists, we've got Kuan Yin. We do have Celtic Cross coming. We do have angels and Madonna coming. I'm still looking for the right Ganesh. I've just never been to a sacred spot where I didn't feel the divine presence. I've never worshiped with faithful people of any tradition that I didn't feel the divine presence. And that's with Wiccans, that's with Buddhists, that's with Hindus, that's with Kriya Yoga, anything, Catholics, Protestants, Jews. And so just piggybacking off of Chris, like, I'm amazed at how ubiquitous, how big God is, and how, you know, the more I search, the more I find. Maybe Jesus knew what he was talking about. Seek and you'll find. The more I seek, the more good stuff I find. And it is all good. I really do believe that God looks at what God has created and called it good. And that includes us, and that includes our journeys. And so my prayer for everyone watching tonight is, may God bless you and keep you. Prayer from the Jewish tradition. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God look upon you kindly and grant you peace. Amen.
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 Thank you,
Amen.
everyone, for the panel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us out in the Facebook world and YouTube world. Reminder, midday prayer every day, Monday through Saturday at noon. This coming Wednesday is also our Share in the Cheer at 6 p.m. And we invite you back for that and some other programs opportunities we have coming up. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you.